My stepsister stole my book and got famous, but she didn't know I had proof of everything. It all started on a crisp autumn morning when the world seemed painted in shades of amber and gold. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of my laptop as I typed furiously, pouring every ounce of myself into what would become the Whispering Tide. It wasn't just a story, it was my heart laid bare, my soul stitched into words. I had spent months crafting it, living with its characters, breathing their lives until they felt more real than anything else around me. My stepsister Clara breezed into the kitchen that day wearing one of her signature outfits, something effortlessly chic yet somehow intimidatingly perfect. Her glossy blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders like she'd stepped out of an ad campaign, and her lips were painted a bold red that screamed confidence. She always carried herself like she owned the room, even if no one else was there to notice. "Hey sis," she said breezily, grabbing an apple from the counter without so much as glancing at me. "Still writing your little novel?" I bristled at the dismissive tone but forced a smile anyway. "Yeah, still working on it. Almost done, actually." Clara smirked, taking a bite of the apple. "Good luck with that. You know how hard it is to get published these days? Like, impossible unless you're already famous or something." She shrugged casually, as though this were common knowledge everyone should have accepted by now. "Anyway, let me know when you're done. Maybe I can give you some pointers." Her condescension stung, but I bit back my retort. We weren't close, not really, but we shared a roof because our parents had married late in life, blending two families who barely understood each other. Still, I tried to be civil. After all, we were technically sisters now, bound together by circumstance if not affection. That evening, after Clara left for some party or another, I finished the final chapter of The Whispering Tide. Tears pricked my eyes as I read through the last lines, feeling both elated and hollow. Elated because I'd finally completed something so deeply personal, hollow because I knew the hardest part was yet to come, finding someone willing to take a chance on an unknown writer like me. Over the next few weeks, I sent query letters to agents and publishers, hopeful but realistic about the uphill battle ahead. Rejection emails trickled in slowly, each one chipping away at my resolve. But then one afternoon, everything changed. Clara burst into my room uninvited, clutching her phone like it held the secrets of the universe. "Oh my God, Emma," she squealed, practically vibrating with excitement. "You won't believe this, I just got signed by HarperCollins." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "They want to publish my book," she exclaimed, waving her phone wildly. "Isn't that amazing? I mean, I always knew I had it in me, but wow, this is huge." I stared at her, confused. "Your book? What book?" She rolled her eyes dramatically, as though I were being deliberately obtuse. "The one I've been working on, duh. Remember? I told you weeks ago." "No, you didn't," I said firmly, though doubt began creeping in. Had she mentioned something? No, surely I would have remembered. Wouldn't I? "Well, whatever," Clara said, brushing off my skepticism. "The point is, they love it. They think it's going to be big. Huge, even. Can you believe it?" As she rambled on about advances and marketing plans, a cold dread settled over me. Something about the way she spoke, the casual arrogance, the entitlement, felt wrong. Too rehearsed. Too convenient. Later that night, unable to shake the gnawing suspicion twisting in my gut, I opened my laptop and pulled up the manuscript file for The Whispering Tide. My breath caught in my throat as I scrolled through the pages. Entire paragraphs were missing. Key scenes I remembered vividly were nowhere to be found. Panic surged through me as I checked the revision history, only to discover that the document had been accessed, and altered, from Clara's account. A wave of nausea hit me. How could she? How dare she? But before anger could fully consume me, a strange calm washed over me instead. Because amidst the shock and betrayal, I realized something crucial. I had proof. Hidden deep within the recesses of my cloud storage, untouched by Clara's meddling, was an earlier version of the manuscript. One dated weeks before she claimed to have started hers. One that bore witness to the truth. Days turned into weeks, and Clara's star continued to rise. Social media buzzed with talk of her debut novel, Whispers Beneath the Waves, which bore an uncanny resemblance to mine. Critics praised her lyrical prose and vivid imagery, completely unaware that those words had once belonged to someone else. Meanwhile, I watched silently from the sidelines, torn between rage and despair. Part of me wanted to confront her, to march into her room, throw the original manuscript in her face, and demand answers. But another part, a quieter, more calculating part, knew better. Confrontation wouldn't solve anything. Not yet. Not until I had a plan. So I bided my time, observing Clara's newfound fame with a mixture of fascination and disgust. She thrived under the spotlight, basking in the adoration of strangers while I drowned in resentment. Friends and acquaintances congratulated her endlessly, none of them noticing the shadow lurking behind her radiant smile. Least of all Clara herself. One particularly unbearable evening, I attended a small gathering at her request. Ostensibly, it was meant to celebrate her success, but it quickly devolved into yet another opportunity for her to hold court. Surrounded by admirers, she regaled them with tales of her creative process, spinning elaborate lies about inspiration striking during long walks by the ocean or late-night brainstorming sessions fueled by coffee and determination. I sat in the corner, nursing a glass of wine, feeling invisible. Yet as I listened to her spin her web of deceit, a spark of defiance ignited within me. Let her revel in her stolen glory, for now. She didn't know what I knew. She didn't realize that I held the key to unraveling everything she'd built. After the party, I returned home and opened the folder containing my original manuscript. Reading through it again felt like rediscovering an old friend. The characters leapt off the page, alive and vibrant, reminding me why I'd written the story in the first place. This wasn't just about revenge or vindication, it was about justice. About reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Inspiration struck like lightning. Over the following days, I began crafting a new narrative, one that wove together elements of my own experience with fictionalized details designed to expose Clara's treachery. If she thought she could steal my work and get away with it, she was sorely mistaken. I would make sure of that. As winter descended upon the city, blanketing it in snow, Clara's book tour reached its peak. Interviews, signings, photo ops, it seemed like she was everywhere, her name plastered across billboards and magazine covers. People marveled at her meteoric rise, calling her a literary prodigy destined for greatness. And through it all, I waited. Patience wasn't easy, especially when every fiber of my being screamed for action. But I reminded myself daily that timing was everything. Rushing in blindly would only sabotage my chances. So I honed my craft, polishing my new manuscript until it gleamed like a blade ready to strike. Then, one fateful morning, opportunity presented itself. Clara announced that she would be hosting a live Q&A session on social media, answering questions from fans and sharing insights into her creative journey. Thousands tuned in, eager to hear directly from the woman behind the phenomenon sweeping the literary world. When the moment came, I logged on anonymously, my fingers trembling above the keyboard. As Clara smiled brightly into the camera, fielding questions with practiced ease, I typed out my query and hit send. "Hi Clara," the message read. "Your book is incredible, but I'm curious, how did you manage to write such a complex story so quickly? Did you draw inspiration from any specific sources?" For the first time that day, Clara hesitated. A flicker of unease crossed her face before she masked it with a laugh. "Oh, just lots of late nights and caffeine," she replied smoothly. "Sometimes ideas come to you when you least expect them." But I saw the crack in her armor. Saw the way her composure faltered ever so slightly. And I knew then with absolute certainty that the endgame was within reach. With renewed determination, I finalized my manuscript and prepared to send it to select agents and publishers. Each submission included a carefully worded note explaining the situation, along with copies of the original files proving beyond doubt that Clara's masterpiece was nothing more than plagiarism wrapped in designer packaging. Yet even as I took these steps, uncertainty lingered. Would anyone believe me? Or would Clara's charm and influence shield her from accountability? These questions haunted me, keeping me awake at night as I wrestled with doubt and fear. Still, I refused to give up. Because buried beneath the anger and hurt was a fierce, unyielding hope, a belief that truth, no matter how obscured, would eventually find its way to light. And when it did, Clara would learn the hard way that stealing someone's dreams came with a price far greater than fame. But that price hadn't been paid yet. For now, I remained in the shadows, watching, waiting. Waiting for the moment when justice would finally catch up to her. The days following the live Q&A felt like a slow-motion unraveling. Clara's polished facade began to crack in ways I hadn't anticipated. It started subtly, a missed deadline here, a vague answer there, but soon her carefully constructed empire of lies showed signs of crumbling under its own weight. It was during one particularly tense dinner at home that I noticed something different about her. Normally, Clara breezed through family meals with an air of effortless superiority, but tonight, she picked at her food distractedly, her phone buzzing incessantly beside her plate. When our stepmother asked if everything was okay, Clara forced a brittle smile and muttered something about online trolls. Trolls? That piqued my interest. Up until now, Clara had been riding high on waves of adoration, shielded by glowing reviews and fawning fans. The idea that someone or something was chipping away at her pedestal sent a thrill of vindication coursing through me. Could it be possible that the seeds of doubt were already taking root? Later that night, unable to resist temptation, I crept into Clara's room while she was out meeting friends. Her laptop sat open on her desk, and though guilt gnawed at me for violating her privacy, curiosity won out. I scrolled through her emails, social media notifications, and messages, piecing together fragments of what appeared to be a growing storm. Dozens of comments accused her of plagiarism, some citing eerie similarities between Whispers Beneath the Waves and obscure works they claimed existed long before hers. Others pointed out passages that seemed lifted verbatim from lesser-known indie authors. While none of them mentioned me directly, the accusations painted a damning picture. And then, buried among the chaos, I found something even more intriguing: private messages from an anonymous account claiming to have evidence of her theft. My heart raced as I read the exchange. The sender taunted Clara with cryptic references to files, dates, and timestamps, all eerily familiar. My stomach churned as realization dawned: whoever this person was, they weren't bluffing. They knew. Just like I did. Clara's responses grew increasingly frantic, alternating between defensive denials and desperate attempts to bribe the messenger into silence. But the tone shifted dramatically toward the end of the thread. In her last reply, she sounded defeated, almost resigned, as though she finally understood the gravity of her situation. I closed the laptop, my mind reeling. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to march downstairs, wake her up when she got home, and demand answers. But another part, a darker, colder part, knew better. This wasn't just about exposing her anymore. This was about making sure justice was served on my terms. As weeks passed, the whispers grew louder. Rumors spread across literary circles like wildfire, fueled by anonymous posts dissecting Clara's book line by line. Critics who had once lauded her talent began retracting their praise, calling for investigations into the authenticity of her work. Even HarperCollins issued a terse statement promising to look into the allegations, though they stopped short of admitting wrongdoing. Through it all, Clara became a ghost of her former self. Gone was the confident, larger-than-life persona. In its place stood a hollow shell, perpetually glued to her phone, eyes darting nervously every time it buzzed. She avoided public appearances, cancelled interviews, and retreated further into isolation. Our parents tried to intervene, offering support and reassurance, but Clara brushed them off with curt dismissals or outright hostility. I watched it all unfold with a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Satisfaction because she was finally paying for what she'd done, not just to me, but to countless others whose voices she might have silenced along the way. Sorrow because deep down, despite everything, I couldn't shake the memory of the girl she used to be before ambition consumed her. The girl who used to laugh freely, who dreamed big without stepping on anyone else to get there. But nostalgia wouldn't save her. Nor would it absolve her. One evening, after returning from yet another fruitless attempt to clear her name, Clara confronted me in the hallway. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair unkempt, a far cry from the polished perfectionist I'd grown accustomed to despising. "You know something, don't you?" she hissed, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You've been behind this whole thing, haven't you?" I stared at her, feigning innocence. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb with me," she snapped, jabbing a finger in my direction. "Someone's been leaking information about me, information only you could have. Admit it." For a moment, I considered telling her the truth. Confessing everything, the stolen manuscript, the original files, the painstaking effort I'd put into ensuring she'd face consequences for her actions. But something held me back. Maybe it was the raw vulnerability in her expression, the flicker of fear that betrayed how close she was to breaking. Or maybe it was the knowledge that revealing myself prematurely would rob me of the upper hand I'd worked so hard to gain. Instead, I shrugged nonchalantly. "If you're guilty of something, Clara, maybe you should focus on fixing your own mess instead of blaming me." Her jaw tightened, and for a split second, I thought she might lunge at me. But instead, she turned on her heel and stormed off, slamming her bedroom door behind her. That night, I received an email from one of the agents I'd contacted months earlier. Their message was brief but electrifying. "Dear Emma, thank you for reaching out regarding your manuscript. We've reviewed your materials and find them compelling, especially given recent developments surrounding Ms. Clara Bennett's publication. Please call us at your earliest convenience to discuss next steps." A surge of triumph washed over me as I reread the words. Recent developments. They knew. Someone, whether it was the same anonymous source tormenting Clara or someone else entirely, had tipped them off. Either way, the tide was turning. I called the agent immediately, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Over the course of the conversation, we discussed strategy, timing, and potential legal ramifications. By the time we hung up, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since discovering Clara's betrayal, I allowed myself to envision a future where justice prevailed, not just for me, but for every writer whose voice had been silenced by greed and deceit. The weeks that followed blurred together in a whirlwind of activity. Lawyers drafted cease and desist letters, publishers scrambled to distance themselves from Clara's tainted reputation, and journalists clamored for exclusive interviews with a mysterious whistleblower threatening to expose her crimes. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, biding my time until the perfect moment arrived. Finally, it came. A major literary magazine announced plans to publish an exposé detailing Clara's descent from celebrated author to disgraced plagiarist. The article featured excerpts from my original manuscript, side-by-side comparisons highlighting the blatant similarities between our works, and screenshots of incriminating correspondence. At the center of it all stood my name, not as a victim, but as a survivor determined to reclaim her story. When the article hit newsstands, the world exploded. Social media erupted with outrage, hashtags condemning Clara trended globally, and calls for accountability echoed across every platform imaginable. Even those who had initially dismissed the allegations against her couldn't ignore the mountain of evidence staring them in the face. And yet, amidst the chaos, I remained focused. Because while the world condemned Clara, I knew the real battle lay ahead. Justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about healing. About finding closure not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever dared to dream only to have those dreams stolen away. So I wrote. Not to seek revenge, but to remind myself why I fell in love with storytelling in the first place. To honor the characters and worlds I had created, free from the shadow of betrayal. And to prove once and for all, that no matter how dark things may seem, the truth will always find a way to shine through. But the journey wasn't over. Not yet. Because as much as I wanted to believe that exposing Clara would bring peace, I couldn't shake the feeling that forgiveness, true lasting forgiveness, would require more than just victory. It would require understanding, compassion, and perhaps, someday, reconciliation. Until then, I kept writing. One word at a time.